Goblins flee the world of light, cursed and wretched in their plight. Dark, dank caves the goblins live in. Goblins pray to him who begat them. Help us take back what's lost today. Magubliet, guide us on the way. Make a race whose power can end the reign of elves and dwarves and men. Hobgoblin, hobgoblin. Gather now by standards, by swords, come unite the scattered hordes. By order, hobgoblins will reclaim the world that goblins fled in shame. Bring war, bring strife upon the land. One tribe in victory will stand. Guide to war the lesser kin, and lend them strength the day to win. Hobgoblin, hobgoblin. Don the armor of fallen foes and pick the flesh clean from their bones. Hobgoblin tribes grow strong through war. If they know peace, they grow no more. Shielded lands defended with might will never, never flee the light. Vengeful conquest now begin. All goblin kind come join your kin. Hobgoblin, hobgoblin.
Hello everybody, this is AJ, you're with the Mighty Glue Stick, and today, obviously, I'm going to be covering hobgoblins. Now, I've saved the best for last, I think, with hobgoblins. This is the main goblin race, if you ask me. They are quite a different kettle of fish to goblins and bugbears, and they also have a pivotal role in how those two races operate, because they are basically offshoots of the hobgoblin breed. In the world of Greyhawk, hobgoblins are known as high goblins, and that's kind of how you should see them, in the light that they are actually true goblinoids. They are quite a different foe to contend with than a goblin or a bugbear, who are essentially chaotic creatures, because hobgoblins are very lawful. They are lawful, they are evil. And they are a functional society of monster kind that you don't generally see anywhere else. And they are not like orcs or other such creatures. They do have a brutal existence, but it's not a savage existence. It's quite different from orcs and other types of creatures such as that. So we'll just basically cover your standard hobgoblin. They stand about, they're taller than a human being up to about 6'6". They have a reddish orangey skin, which they accentuate with tattoos and ritual scarring and deep body piercings and things. Their hair is typically black and worn long in a top knot or a braid, and they have more predatory, bestial features, such as sort of canine hooked ears, pointed ears. They've got sharper features. They've got a very strong jaw that sort of is more projected out from their face. They've got tusks like teeth that are very predatory. Their eyes are a yellowish, cat-like yellow, almost a lion-like yellow, with dark rims. They've got beetle brows that hang heavy over and give them a scowling appearance. Their nose is sort of snubbed and upturned somewhat, and they have a continual sort of sneering expression on their face, and their lips are dark-lipped and dour, sort of pointed down. Their bodies are muscular but lean, given more to agility than brute strength, and they carry themselves very well. They have the typical black fingernails that are pointed like claws of most goblin kind, and they carry themselves reasonably upright, not sort of hunched over or sort of hunchbacked like other goblin kind. So yeah, they're very rigid and erect, and when you look at them, they look like a powerful and graceful fighter, like they've spent their entire life on their toes, ready to react, and that is essentially exactly what they do. So meeting a hobgoblin is if you're expecting a savage beast, you're going to be very surprised and mistaken in what you thought you were going to be meeting. So they're a medium humanoid, lawful evil. They typically wear chainmail and carry a shield, giving them armor class of 18. Your basic Hobgoblin has got 11 hit points and a speed of 30 feet. Their statistics are relatively average across the board. They've got 1 point less in Charisma, but otherwise they're fairly average with a Constitution of 12, Dexterity of 12, and a Strength of 13. So they're a human equivalent. They have a Dark Vision out to 60 feet, Passive Perception with 10, they speak Common and Goblin, Challenge rating of half. They've got a ability called Martial Advantage. Once per turn, the Hobgoblin can deal an extra 7 or 2d6 damage to a creature it hits with a weapon attack, if that creature is within 5 feet of an ally of the Hobgoblin that isn't incapacitated. So if its ally isn't incapacitated. And they typically use long swords and long bows. So +3 to hit, and do 5 points standard damage, slashing damage, or 6 slashing damage if used with both hands. And they're very adept with the longbow, +3 to hit, short range of 150, long range of 600 feet, doing 5 points piercing damage. And the tactics of the Hobgoblin, if you meet them in combat, you'll be prepared for them using advanced military tactics on you. So they will take advantage of any high ground. They will keep reserves back if they suspect that there's ever any chance of a spellcaster coming up against them. They'll keep a couple in reserve back with their longbows, readying to take a shot as soon as the spellcaster casts a spell, in which case they will have to contend with a volley of arrows coming directly at them. Because the Hobgoblins realise that losing a few actions of these reserve troops is worth the effort when it could mean the end of a battle when a wizard casts sleep or paralysis or something across the masses. They are strongly focused on fighters, so it would take a very determined adventuring group to take them on one-on-one, particularly if they're coming at them in a massed group, which they probably would be. So the the physiology of a Hobgoblin is that they're essentially born predators, and this heritage is apparent in their physical shape as described. They are lithe and graceful, almost feline, really, in the way that they move, and they accentuate themselves with tattoos with their crimson orange skin, but they're not the typical sort of ink tattoos. They are deep gouging tattoos, more like the moko of Maori people, where they sort of carve it into the skin. And of course they use deep body piercings and things like that look painful and are painful. So while it may be run through with metal in several places, the Hobgoblin always keeps the red, or in some cases blue, nose clear, so they never damage or scar or pierce their nose, because it has specific cultural significance to them. So their hair is coarse, usually grey or brown in colour, covers the hide of the Hobgoblin. Basically, they're quite hairy, and they control it and keep it tied back, typically with bone jewellery crafted from the remains of slain foes, or adornments that the Hobgoblin wears, which call attention to their battle prowess and their high tolerance for physical hardship. They may wear spikes and things like that are physically uncomfortable. Psychology, well, that's really where the Hobgoblin steps quite far away from the other goblin kind. They have a rigid, regimented society, which I'll cover in some depth. And it's quite a fascinating society compared to other humanoid races. They have a lot of animosity towards elves, who are really polar opposites to them in every way, and they quite often will use elves as a deriding insult amongst each other. Calling a Hobgoblin an elf is a deep insult, because they see elves as worthless, weak, ineffectual fops, basically, completely different from themselves, and they represent everything that they scorn and deride. They find elves disgusting. They have a modicum of respect for dwarves and a little bit of respect for humans, because of the occasional prowess and the durability and stoicness and willpower and organisation that humans and dwarves can exhibit. They live by the adage of a personal perimeter, and this was described very well in Dragon Magazine in a fantastic article which I'm drawing heavily on by Terry Edwards, illustrated by Sam Wood from Dragon Magazine in July 2003. And it's a really good article. It's one of those monster ecology articles which I highly recommend that you read, as well as the additions in Volo's Guide to Monsters, which cover the hobgoblins and all the goblinoids in some depth. So there's not a lot I can add to these two sources really, because they really cover a lot. If you want to get a better grip on their religion, look up the deity Maglubiet, as well as Nomeg Gaia, which is a deity of war and authority, who's kind of considered the patron deity of hobgoblins in the way that they suppress their emotions, and I'll cover that in a minute. Also the goblinoid god Bargriviek, who emphasises cooperation between the goblin races, but that's kind of been taken over by Maglubliet, who basically took over everything as a god of war and rulership. He pretty much forced his way into controlling all goblin society, and now he's tied in with Bane as well. So Bane also has a heavy influence on the modern hobgoblin. So yeah, the concept of a personal perimeter is one that's fascinating and really defines what a hobgoblin is. So each hobgoblin learns early in life to establish a perimeter of defense. So this is a perimeter of awareness, being ready for constant attack, betrayal. Essentially, they are abused. From a human's perspective, they go through wicked child abuse that essentially leaves them never trusting anyone and protecting their personal space as it relates to their role in creating a strong defense for their society. So personal responsibility adds to collective responsibility. So it's a highly lawful point of view. It's a lawful tribal point of view. So in the hobgoblin mindset, one hobgoblin controls their own immediate area, two control still more, and so forth. Thus, a whole tribe jointly controls a significant area that it claims for its own use. And this is manifest when they first enter an area or when you first encounter a hobgoblin. They are automatically suspicious of attack. Always. So if you meet a hobgoblin in a bar, he won't be sitting with his back to the door. He won't be sitting with a group of friends. He won't be drunk. He'll be sitting in a corner, watching everything very carefully. He'll have his weapons within easy reach. He may even have one readied under the table, held against it with his knee, ready to draw it in a split second. He'll be nursing one drink, the entire night, and he will not get drunk. And when you approach him, he's automatically expecting a scam, an assassination attempt, or similar. If you offer him a deal, he will look at it as bait, not an opportunity. If it turns out to be an opportunity, he'll be looking at how he can get it away from you, so have nothing to do with you and take whatever you have for himself and his tribe. And this may actually manifest itself in him killing you. If you haven't safeguarded, or if you've given him too much information and he doesn't need you anymore, he will quickly dispose of you or just part company. Pretty unfriendly. They're generally regarded to be paranoid, aggressive, and cruel, and dour. Very, very unfeeling and unemotional. If you look at them like a combination of Vulcans and Klingons, so their language and their society is very similar to Klingons, except they don't really hold personal honor per se. It's not a personal responsibility, it's a standing in society. So when they've done something to not assist or acknowledge another hobgoblin, it can be very harsh on them, because that's an opening for the cruelty of hobgoblins to pour on them, because they're not doing their part. They're not holding up their personal perimeter. So yeah, they're always on the defensive, basically, is what I should say. And they're constantly evaluating their surroundings for tactical advantages. Always. They never let their guard down. This tendency is most notable when they're outside the protective confines of their own tribal lands, and they will never show their emotions publicly. They're stoic to the extreme, much more stoic and paranoid than a dwarf. So they take that somewhat uncomfortable, sticky aspect of dwarven culture to an extreme. Their morality is a narrow focus that leaves no room for moral questions. Mercy and compassion can only weaken the perimeter and their personal perimeter and cloud their thinking. So they do not form loving personal attachments with anyone. They assess and contribute to the tribe and everything that they do, including breeding. They don't form loving family relationships. Individual freedom is meaningless, and has no place in Hobgoblin society, and their respect for freedom of others never enters a Hobgoblin's thoughts. So it's humans' fault that their society is weak. They see no point in sugarcoating their attitude towards other races and their weaknesses, and they will point out very quickly if anybody questions them or judges them or looks down on them. They will very quickly point out everything that's wrong with their society from a Hobgoblin's point of view, and nobody can tell them otherwise, because as far as they're concerned, they're the survivors. They're the ones who've got it right. They're the ones who have a healthy level of suspicion and aggression in a world full of monsters and competing intelligent races. They will survive and they will conquer eventually. Unfortunately, this also extends to other Hobgoblin tribes, so it's a difficult thing to get any significant amount of Hobgoblins together to form a really threatening warband, but boy, when they do, it's extremely dangerous for any other intelligent race or civilization around, because they are predatory and they're not agrarian, which means they don't really grow any food for themselves, and they quickly hunt an area clean of any animal life, or any grains or resources or farmlets or villages that are in the area. They will pick them clean and then they will move on, and they pick them clean of everything. So they will kill and eat other humanoids, they will kill all their livestock, they will steal all of their implements, they will repurpose everything that they get. If a farm implement or something like that is useless, they will smelt it down and they will reforge it into weapons and armor. They have no use for farming tools and things like that. Their society in that regard is broken up into a hierarchy and a caste system, a social hierarchy. So unlike the chaotic goblinoid cousins, they maintain a highly organized social order that has three castes, which is the military, the religious, and the worker castes. Now, a worker caste is no less important in their society and has no less esteem and honor than a warrior class. However, the warrior class is more common and is more likely to be the leader of their society. So a war leader is typically a cross-classed fighter, rogue, hobgoblin who's risen through the ranks through sheer experience. They don't have a goal of dying in combat, which is something that you might think they would be wanting to do. If you think of them as Vikings or Klingons, for instance, wanting to go to Valhall or Stovikor, that's not how they think. Death in battle means that they haven't maintained their personal perimeter, they've let down the defences, and they've died. That's not what they want to do. They want to live and contribute to their society in another way through their experience and training others, and if need be, they will sacrifice themselves for an adept so that they can use magic and things to do deals and packs and things. I'll cover that in a minute. So they have the military class is divided up into command and warriors. The religious caste is broken up into priests and instructors, and also a select group that are outside of the norm, who are raised from birth to be assassins or scouts or spies, or deal with other things like that. And the labor caste, which is crafters and workers, and also those that deal with beasts of war, trainers and things like that, so that's where you get your blacksmiths and your leather workers and your armor smiths and fletchers and things like that. So the caste assignment is based on both individual affinity for a given task and the tribe's current needs, and gender has no relation to anything in Hobgoblin society. It doesn't really matter a jot. Apart from their names, the religious caste names them at birth, but their names evolve over time as they're given assignments. Essentially, when they're an adolescent, they go through standardized training through a series of instructors. They don't have a parental relationship really, although their parents do know them and they do know who their parents are, and they are subject to even more social pressure from their parents to basically be the best hobgoblin they can be and do their part for society, because it will reflect badly on them otherwise. But they experience no love, no laughter, no happiness, no joy. Those sort of concepts are social faux pas in hobgoblin society. If you show emotion, you're considered to be weak, and that's got a lot to do with the Nomeg Gaia, who is deity of war and authority, who is considered to be emotionless. So even in combat where he receives brutal wounds, he will show no facial expression, completely stoic. And hobgoblins see that as strength, so they show no emotion in public. They will only show emotion when they are jeering or cajoling or otherwise inciting a fight between a rival hobgoblin tribe, or when they're talking about things that they hate, such as elves. That's about the most emotion you'll ever see out of hobgoblin, is when they're deriding elves and gaining some satisfaction and telling you exactly how ridiculously useless elves are. So, names. The suffix ken is added to the name of a female, and the suffix con is added to that of a male. This construction is then followed by the mother's or father's name, the tribe's name, and the individual's position. For example, a male hobgoblin warrior might be named Maelgerm, Ulokhon of Ailton's Shield, guard of the first perimeter. In human lands, a hobgoblin separated from his tribe might use a name that contains references to his past, but still identifies himself based on his new role in homeland. For example, Hemilion of Elshim Merchant Prekos Caravan Guard. And in pronouncing hobgoblin, I find that having a passing familiarity with Klingon is useful. But it's also, they base it on the Dwarven script, and they have that same sort of rolling R's and things. So, yeah, they'll have that similar sort of R sound in what they so grr Nomeg Gaia Marubliet. So you can throw a rolling R in whenever you want to. And they sort of split the word up into bitten off consonants. Maglubiat and t and th, and making hissing sounds when they speak as well, because they've got tusks, and their whole, if you picture their demeanour as rough, as dour and biting off their language, so they only speak when they have to, or when they do speak, it's either an order or a typical saying, or it'll be a chant or a war song, marching song or something like that, or an axiom like a Sun Tzu sort of axiom of war, a saying, a snippet of wisdom, or they'll be casting derision or insults, and yeah, all of those things sort of lend to having a bit of harsh language. But of course they have poetry that talks about their honour and talks about the tribe's superiority and things. So although they're born for combat, as I mentioned, they don't intend to end their lives on the battlefield. Time to die is chosen by or for any individual who can no longer contribute anything to the tribe. Also, by a similar bent, they can change their rank or caste in society if they're no longer able to perform their function, but they're not completely useless. So a smith who loses one of his hands, for instance, may go into something else, like instructing in fencing with one sword, or some other sort of role. They may become a historian, because you only really need one hand to write. That sort of thing. And their primary concern for the Hobgoblin tribe is survival, and that means that when they set up camp anywhere, because they're constantly moving, because of their non-agrarian nature, they need to move on and continually conquer new areas and take over resources that others have gained or gathered. So they don't do any mining for themselves typically, although they may set slave races to do it for them. They're big believers in slavery and keeping others around to do their dirty work, and that's kind of where bugbears and goblins come into it. Nobody really knows for sure whether the hobgoblins bred the goblinoid races for specific purposes, or whether they are natural offshoots that they've sort of incorporated into their society when need be. They are known to use Gulvorg, or the War Warg in Goblin. It's a gigantic black wolf with scythe-like fangs and dragon-like spinal protuberances and a serpent-like tail, tipped with a mace-like bony knob. So that's definitely mage-bred and created and bred by Hobgoblin spellcasters for combat, and they're kind of cunning and ravenous and reproduce slowly in the wild. So yeah, few Hobgoblin tribes can afford to keep them because they basically eat a lot of resources. The Varag, or Blood Chaser, is a feral goblinoid, about 7 feet tall but primarily hunched over and quadrupedal, and they're magically bred with direwolves to create a creature almost as lupine as goblins. And the Hobgoblins are very fond of Varags and treat them as pets, but they're again very rare. They'll also keep drakes and other creatures, and some Hobgoblin tribes also keep Barghasts. Barghasts are actually enemies of goblin kind. They're a curse put upon them when their god felt slighted. So, but if you do find a Hobgoblin tribe which has got a Barghast in them, be very wary, because the evil will be ramped up quite a bit, and you may encounter Hobgoblin blackguards and very evil spellcasters and things like that, because the Barghast will urge them to do dark and dirty things. And of course, as soon as a Hobgoblin has distinguished itself enough, the Barghast will seek to kill it and eat it as part of its tribute. Anyway, so yeah, look up Barghast if you want to find out more about them. Yeah, so they're driven to war and conquest. That's part of their religious orientation and a strong factor of their society. Even if it wasn't, they would still be orientated to do so, because they don't understand farming and they have no interest in it. Although they are omnivorous and do eat bread and things like that, and they will strip any plant life out of the area. It's not their focus really, and they prefer to chew into an animal that they've killed. They see nothing wrong with hunting, and consider the worker class who goes out and kills and hunts to be just as important as a warrior. The religious caste can overrule the leader on occasion, and they'll basically do so in a roundabout way that doesn't directly confront them by saying it's not the will of the god, and essentially they don't do it very often, but when they do it, the leader has enough wisdom to say, it's the will of the god, therefore I decide that we will do this. So that the religious caste can sometimes put their foot down, just sort of quietly, and not cause the leader to lose face. Otherwise that would result in a weakening of the tribe through division in that way. So they don't generally do that. So it's kind of different from orcs and things like that, where the religious caste will actually work against the leader on occasion. So sometimes they just generally, they change their mind. It may be that the leader is making a mistaken decision because he hasn't consulted the religious caste, and their divinations and oracle magics have given additional information. So the military makes up the largest of the tribe's 3 social divisions, and all hobgoblins, when they reach an adolescent age and have finished their initial tutorial sort of stages, or brutal child abuse, if you want to put it that way, they go through mandatory military service for a while, and then they are assessed by the religious caste and then put into their roles in society. So whatever they are best at is what they're put into. They may be better archers or warriors or just grunts, or they may have the strength or fortitude or concentration to be scribes or adepts and blacksmiths and things like that. Adepts are a very important part of the goblin warband, because they can wear armor, and even using a few spells such as lightning bolt or flame hands and things like that is very useful, particularly because the opponents may not be expecting it, and the adepts can sort of blend into the group protection of a warband, and be quite useful in that regard. But they'll also keep archers at all times, and be ready to split their forces or flank, or move in quite complicated maneuvers where they split up the party into more manageable, smaller chunks, and they will, as I said, try and disrupt spellcasting whenever possible and gain high ground and get a tactical advantage. When they build their bases, because their tribe, their fortification is really like a fire base, where they have an outer perimeter with watchtowers and defensible outlying stations, so like watch posts. That'll have small squads of say 6 to 9 hobgoblins and possibly a warg with them, and they will constantly move around the perimeter. They will actually reshape the landscape to redirect rivers into moats. They will build palisades of sharpened logs or more permanent sort of fixtures, and they build up earth embankments to create high ground and create natural obstacles which channel anybody who's approaching en masse into their base. So before you even get to the perimeter of their central compound, you will have already gone through a meat grinder of fast and mobile attack squads that are skirmishing and taking you out as you go, and of course a withering hail of arrows coming from watchtowers and things, and any high ground and at the top of their palisades and things around the place. And then on the inside you've got tents arranged around, and there's weapons dispersed everywhere, so pretty much every hobgoblin, even old workers and things like that, grunt labourers, will have ready access to a weapon and armour, and are ready to leap up and defend to the death their encampment against any aggressors and any incursion. Hobgoblins by nature are not want to have anybody ruling over them. They seek to rule over others, and they will be paranoid and realise that nobody's really going to want to work with them or to their best interest other than themselves. So they will go out of their way when they enter an area to suppress and put down any possible resistance, and then they'll go about taking everything that they need and stripping everyone's land and property of all possessions and possibly their lives, unless they see some reason why they may be coming back this way soon. So they'll leave a few straggling survivors to rebuild, even if they've killed all combat ready menfolk in the area and just left women and children to rebuild. So by the time they come back, they will have grown and re-established farmlands and things like that, and the hobgoblins will come back and take it all again. So it's kind of good that their tribes are limited in number because they constantly rove around and take, and that's just the way it is. They see nothing wrong with taking everything from the environment. They have no concept of conservation. In fact, most people in the D&D world don't. So yeah, the labour class, the crafters and workers of the labour class, are respected as the heart of the hobgoblin tribe, composed primarily of experts and warriors. They produce food, arms and armour, housing, clothing, other needed items, and they all receive military training. So yeah, they're just as important as anyone else. And the religious tribe is the smallest of the three castes, but they also make up the most individual of the hobgoblins, so those with keen intellect and that follow the ideals of hobgoblin society quite they cleave close to their hearts. So it's not a faction of rebels, it's not a faction of people who are outside of hobgoblin society. They really are the heart of hobgoblin society that glues it together. And assassins and things like that, so they generally have a squad of scouts and assassins or rangers who are able to operate on their own, but instead of being those who don't fit well with hobgoblin society, they are the ideals of hobgoblin society, and they are very zealously coached or groomed and indoctrinated into the hobgoblin point of view. So assassins work for the hobgoblin society, they don't work outside of it. Rangers and things like that come back to hobgoblin society, and what they do, everything they do is completely focused on the good of the tribe, the good of the tribe, the good of the tribe. They don't walk around and sniff roses and examine herbs and learn about nature. They are only interested in tracking prints, tracking game, assessing the area for possible threats, establishing where the best site to establish the next camp is, that sort of thing. So they're really more like surveyors or stealth planners, forward command, you could say. And of course, the assassins just sent in whenever you need an assassin, whenever a squad of hobgoblins won't do the job. So yeah, so life in the hobgoblin society is fairly brutal. Yeah, that's about it really. So okay, in Volo's guide they talk about, just giving you a base overview here, they talk about the brutal civility of the hobgoblin tribe, that they hold themselves to high standard of military honour, and that they have a long history of shared traditions recorded and retold to keep the knowledge fresh for new generations. They do this in the form of poetry, art, and their chants and things, so when they're marching or drilling or doing that sort of stuff, and also bodies of law, much like Sun Tzu's Art of War. That would be a perfect hobgoblin text that you would find in the a pride of place. If they had such a thing as a book, it would be something like that. So yeah, they don't really have the trappings of a civil society. They don't have perfume and flowery clothes and things like that. They have an implacable society based on military rank. So their first rank is warlord, the second rank is general, third rank is captain, fourth rank is fatal axe, fifth rank is spear, sixth rank is fist, and the seventh rank is soldier. And yeah, they follow their orders, their gods. They neither suffer nor give insults, and they reward themselves through glorious action. So yeah, they're a meritocracy, and they uphold the legion at all times. And they take a lot of personal ownership of their legion, and their honour is bound up in their military prowess and things. Yeah. So I'll probably at some stage cover Norkers as well, which is another lesser known goblin kind. Basically an armoured goblin, which is kind of interesting. And yeah, I might do some more on the Goblin Society and hobgoblins later on. But that's enough for today's video. It's stretched on quite a ways, and I'll be catching up with you guys again soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.